and welcome to Telewizja Republika. Over the past day, barbaric Russian aggression in Ukraine resulted in the deaths of 2 civilians and injuries of 31 others across Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Kharkiv and Kherson Oblast. In a brutal drone strike in Kherson, 1 individual was killed and 16 were injured, including 2 young girls. This heinous attack also severely damaged the gas pipeline, a humanitarian aid warehouse, and numerous homes. In Kharkiv, civilians suffered from a guided bomb assault that damaged 65 houses, several commercial buildings, a shopping center, and multiple vehicles. Ukrainian forces launched a targeted drone attack on the Rednitsky chemical plant in Russia's Tver Oblast, Bravo, a facility integral to the Russian aviation and space industries. The strike resulted in significant explosions, impacting operations at one of Russia's key chemical production sites. Local authorities reported that while the facility sustained considerable damage, there were no fatalities. Pretty sad. And they have since stabilized the situation. President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Brussels today to sign yet another security agreement with the European Union. This pact involves commitments to supply Ukraine with modern military equipment, enhance training for Ukrainian forces, and provide support in nuclear and cybersecurity areas. The agreement also includes provisions to assist Ukraine in its reconstruction efforts and to facilitate its eventual integration into the European Union. Hopefully, all these agreements signed by the EU and Ukraine led to something more than just another set of agreements to be signed in a few weeks. In maritime developments, Russia claimed to have downed a US RQ-4 Global Hawk drone over the Black Sea, a claim that remains unverified and met with skepticism from the Pentagon and Western analysts. The alleged incident has raised concerns about escalating military tensions in the region, and that might be the sole purpose of this claim. Concurrently, the Ukrainian armed forces' destruction of the Karakut-class missile ship Cyclone last month, the last Russian missile ship equipped with caliber cruise missiles in the Crimea, I'm really sad that it happened, underscores the ongoing strategic losses for the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. In response, notorious war criminal Vladolf Putler, during a meeting discussing shipbuilding on Wednesday, June 26th, emphasized the need for the Navy to enhance its defenses against long-range attacks, specifically calling for deployment of remote threat detection systems to safeguard naval assets. Well, first of all, you have to do something about those jet skis attached or actually the explosives attached to jet skis that are destroying your ship one after another. According to open source intelligence site Molfar, Ukraine has sunk or damaged nearly 60 ships of the Russian Navy. 60. 60. Wow, that's a number. You can join us on rackracon.com. That's our website and that's our Substack. You can drop us and leave us your email address. We'll come back to you with our emails, with reports, and our analysts about the ongoing war against the Western civilization. That's what we are going to talk about on my show. My name is Michał Rachon. This is Racon. And we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
And tonight, to talk about the current situation in Ukraine, our special guest and friend of our show, Colonel Jon Sweet. Great to have you again on our program. So, since we are looking at the things that are going on in Ukraine, we tend to ask ourselves the question: what is the effect of using ATACMS against Russia in Ukraine right now? Because we've seen lots of footage, lots of reports, and we've read lots of reports about the current situation. So I wonder, what is your take as a military professional on those latest developments and using those long-awaited weapons behind the lines? The Ukraine was allowed to use it for many months.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for bringing me back on the show. I know Mark and I both enjoyed the opportunities to talk about Ukraine. ATACMS is a multifaceted, obviously, weapon that Russia is very fearful of. They understand the capabilities of the munitions. It's obviously fired from the HIMARS system, and HIMARS turned the tide of the war back in August, if you recall, last year during the initial counteroffensive. So they're very wary of that. So from two perspectives, in the Donbass and then also in Crimea. In the Donbass, what it's doing in the Kharkiv Oblast is forcing the Russian forces further back off of the border. They're no longer able to assemble directly on the border and come across. They're no longer to fire their artillery from on the other side of the border into the Kharkiv Oblast, because they are now within range of a very deadly weapon system. So it forces them further back in between 20 to 50 to 70 kilometers. So it takes a lot of pressure off those frontline units that are defending the oblast there. Second, in the Crimea Peninsula, is what it's doing. It's affecting Russian air defense systems, the S-300, the S-400, and potentially the S-500 when it arrives. ATACMS is taking out those weapon systems, creating air corridors that could be used later this summer when the F-16s arrive in order to do additional damage to Russian capabilities on the peninsula.
So this is actually because we talked to Thomas Steiner a few weeks ago, and this is actually what he was trying to explain, that the activity, that the Ukrainian activity and destroying those S-300s, S-400s, and other assets, also anti-radar missiles and launchers, is preparing the battlefield for arrival of F-16. Does it mean that, from your military perspective, this is an ongoing process? We are in the process of preparing the battlefield for acquiring those F-16s with the lowest possible damage to those vulnerable in terms of the value of those aircraft. Is that the case? Is that the reason why we see what we see right now?
Sure, I think that's a big reason why. In the Army, we call it preparation of the battlefield, shaping the battlefield, creating conditions. So they're creating conditions today for activities that are going to occur a month, 2, 3 months down the road. It's all about just relentless pressure on the Russian occupation forces that are in Crimea. And yes, they're hitting those air defense sites, but at the same time, they're also going after the airfields that are in that area. They continuously go after the Russian Navy assets, both in the Crimea, but across the sea of Azov. They're striking those too. They're interdicting the Russian capability to continue to supply their forces and to arm and defend the peninsula. But the biggest piece of that is taking out their air defense capability so they can get those fast movers in there. And not just F-16s, but you're starting to see with the MiG-29s and the new French Hammer air defense, or not air defense system, but ballistic missile that can be delivered by the M29. They're starting to hit with precision deep strike capability, and they are making the peninsula untenable.
My basic thinking would be, well, what does it mean? You are destroying, or someone is destroying, a certain missile system like those that you just mentioned. But if we're talking about the time frame of, I don't know, 1 or 2 months, isn't it enough time for Russia to rebuild basically the things that are damaged? Or are we talking about that sophisticated weapon systems that 1 or 2 months is not enough to replace the things that were destroyed?
So they are significantly short on the S-300s and 400s. They're pulling them off of other locations, like along the border with Finland, out towards to their eastern frontier. But they're having to pull weapon systems off lines where they don't have a threat or a significant threat, and they are moving them into Crimea. But it's relentless, and yes, you have to repeat, because they will try their best to reinforce or to bring additional weapon systems into that area. But yeah, the key is repeat, and just wear them down the same way in which the Russian forces try to wear down the Ukrainian forces in the Donbass region.
Let's stop for a second with those F-16s. What do we know about the sources, about the certain planes or types of planes or the versions of the planes that are going to be transferred to Ukraine? What do we know about the ongoing process of training of those pilots? Because on one hand, we hear that for a jet fighter pilot, it's just a matter of maybe days to switch in terms of technique of flying from one type of aircraft to another, for example, from MiG-29 to F-16. But on the other hand, we hear that the differences in the weapon system, and the tactics, and the way you use this kind of aircraft is so huge that this is actually the most part of the biggest part of the training process that those pilots need to undergo. What's the difference? I mean, again, basic thinking, well, that's the jet fighter and that's the jet fighter. It's as if you were switching from one car to another, or that's not that simple.
I know it's not that simple, and there are multiple variants of the platform. The other thing you have to take into consideration is the experience level, and you spoke a little bit on that. There are experienced pilots that are transitioning into the F-16, so the time it takes to train that pilot is significantly less than the other pilots that they're bringing in starting fresh on the F-16. So there's multiple durations, there's multiple timelines. And oh, by the way, it's not just the aircraft and the pilot, but it's the team that has to maintain that aircraft on the ground. It's getting the supply parts in to maintain the aircraft. So it's a complicated process. But one thing I know through the last 28 months or 30 months of combat operations in Ukraine is that Ukraine's going to use that weapon system, not necessarily in the way in which the West intends it to be used, but they are very innovative and adaptive, and they are going to get that platform to fit their unique requirements. So do not be surprised if you see those aircraft being used in ways in which NATO didn't suspect.
So what is your expectation? What is the way that those jet fighters could be used? I mean, again, the basic understanding is we come back to Top Gear, well, sorry, not this movie, Top Gun, a great motion picture with the pilots fighting against each other, the MiG fighter pilots fighting F-16 fighter pilots, but is that really the case? I mean, what is the main reason for which F-16s are needed? It doesn't seem to me that fighting another Russian MiG fighter pilots mid-air or in the dogfights is the real reason for which F-16s are that important on the battlefield.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of the above, Michael, to be honest with you. Look, the F-16 is going to be able to, it's a multifaceted aircraft that can provide close air support for the guys on the ground. But more importantly, it can provide air superiority, with the air-to-air engagements to keep Russian aircraft off of Ukrainian soldiers as they're advancing. But again, those deep strike targets, they're going after the interdiction aspect of the fight, but also again, those airfields, those defensive positions, and we talked about that a lot in the initial counteroffensive about the multi-layered defenses from minefields to trenches but they're going to be able to use those systems to affect the air defense, to affect the air superiority. It's important for those ground forces to feel that they have the ability to maneuver forward without being hit by Russian aircraft. So it's a much needed piece of the puzzle. But again, it's just one weapon system that has to be integrated into the combination of all the weapon systems that they're using. But it will be a maker.
I remember our conversations. I remember our discussions in the earlier phases of the war, where we were hoping that providing the Leopard tanks or providing some certain missile systems or rocket artillery systems are going to change the outcome of the war. And on one hand, it really happened because providing HIMARS and using the HIMARS fueled this counteroffensive that kicked Ruskies out of the territories, the vast part of territories that they stole. But on the other hand, even providing the Leopard tanks, the Western-made tanks, didn't cause the latest or the second counteroffensive of Ukraine to be much more successful. But on the other hand, despite the various claims of Russia that it is amassing 50,000 troops around Kharkiv, that is going to kick in and start to take over the city, that actually didn't happen. What is the reason for which we are seeing that kind of a stalemate? I know that you are a professional, so you probably won't agree that it's a stalemate. But from the perspective, someone who doesn't have the military knowledge, it looks exactly like this. Those lines are hardly moving. Why? What's the way you assess the situation right now?
Yeah, so one of the tools we use in the military when we're wargaming causes and effects is just a simple process of going action, reaction, counteraction. So whatever action that Ukraine does, Russia's going to have a counteraction, and then Ukraine's going to have a reaction to that counteraction. The problem is, from my perspective, a lot of these weapon systems and capabilities are being piecemealed into the fight, and they're being introduced to the Russian adversary at that particular level. So it's not a combined effort. It's just they're being piecemealed in, and Russia's able to respond and react and have a counter until the next system is brought in or until the next restriction is lifted. And that's the problem, obviously, with ATACMS is initially the restriction was you can't fire into Russia. Now you can fire into Russia, but wait, you can't fire beyond 100 kilometers into Russia. So the Russian military is able to react to the reaction and just form a new, if you will, technique to go after Ukraine military, but equally as detrimental is targeting Ukrainian citizens.
Colonel, you and Mark Todd, you wrote an article for New York Post, and you are addressing the things that actually happened over the span of last few days or weeks, also in Crimea. We've heard Russia accusing Ukraine of using the extensive force against the civilian infrastructure, basically against the civilians in their latest attack on Sevastopol. What's your take on it? You are writing about it in this article.
Yeah, so in this article, we were addressing, and actually it was a good follow-on to an article we wrote for the Daily Mail a few days prior to that, in which we were talking about Russia once again, using their nuclear escalation as a method to try to scale back the U.S. response, and then and then now leveraging this war crimes type of response, saying that Ukraine's using U.S. systems to target Russian civilians. And from my perspective, it's simply projection, because the one force on the ground right now that deliberately targets Ukrainian citizens is Russia, and they do it with artillery, they do it with ballistic missiles, they do it with, in some cases, white phosphorus from artillery, they do it with drones. So again, from my perspective, it's just pure projection, and it's intended, I think, from the perspective of, oh, your weapons are being used to target Ukrainians, that somehow that's going to get the Biden administration to say, oh, you guys can't use this weapon system anymore because you're not using it the way we intended. I think the evidence has come out within the past couple of days of two courses of action. One course of action being that an ATACMS munition was intercepted and it fell onto the citizens that were on the beach. That's one. The other is that it was a Russian air defense system that exploded over the beach, killing the Russian citizens on the beach. Either way, Crimea is a combat zone, and for Russian citizens to be vacationing in a combat zone is probably not the best place to spend your summer.
This is the thing that was actually shocking for me. I mean, this footage, and if you had no context, if you wouldn't know what we are actually looking at, we are looking at the land stolen by Russia from Ukraine, and we are looking at the people, as you just mentioned, vacationing while there is a war going on over there, and they're basically vacationing. Probably most of them, or a big number of them, are people who already live there. But again, this is a military operation. Colonel, you also, in a way, address the U.S. administration strategy towards related to this conflict. But Russia actually blames U.S., not only Ukraine, for for this incident. You just mentioned, you just touched upon this, this way of thinking about influencing U.S. politics by such accusations. What is the role of it? What is the effectiveness of these techniques used by Russia?
Yeah, it depends. And right now, I think that the West isn't buying this particular story right now. But in the past, it's been used to divide Western support, and it's been targeting the American audience, but also targeting the audience in Western Europe. It's designed to portray Russia as the victim, as opposed to the aggressor. It's designed to present them again as we're just trying to protect Russia, and we're being assaulted by U.S. weapons. But if turn that around, and from a Ukrainian perspective, look at it from, Russia's firing what? They're firing Iranian drones at us. They're firing North Korean ballistic missiles at us, and they're firing from their entire arsenal of surface of ballistic missiles and their own drones and artillery. So it's projection at its worst, but is being utilized by that one branch within the Russian architecture, the FSB, who is very successful at disinformation, information campaigns. And it's, to some degree, it does work. But I'm starting to think that on the Western side, people are looking at this going, yeah, this doesn't pass the sniff test. And when they see the evidence placed before them, I think more and more people are starting to understand that the Russian narrative isn't what it seems.
Yeah, Colonel, one thing is certain: Russia is very good in killing civilians, killing people, and definitely is very good in lying, also in building great, massive lies and disinfo campaigns. Not that good when it comes to actual war fighting, as we just find out watching this 3 days long special military operations that expanded for more than 2.5 years by now. Colonel, thank you very much for your time. All the best wishes to you and to Mark, great authors and friends of our show. You can follow our guest on X, give him a follow, please, and you can tune in from time to time on RIA Report, as we had an opportunity a couple of days ago on X. Thank you very much. Colonel Jon Sweet was our guest on Telewizja Republika.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, you can join us on rockrachon.com. That's our website. You can leave us your email. We'll drop you a line when we publish our analysis and our materials regarding the ongoing war against the West that we follow on this program. Stay safe. See you soon. Ciao, ciao. Bye.